On the day Grandma Maeve passed away, my divorced parents, who had both remarried, stood over her coffin arguing about who would be stuck with me in my past life. I felt sorry for my dad, Richard. I chose to stay with him, hoping to ease his loneliness. I even helped him pick the numbers for a lottery ticket that ended up winning a $10 million jackpot. But the moment he struck it rich, he bought mansions and luxury cars for my stepmother and step-siblings. Meanwhile, he refused to spend even a few $100s on painkillers for me. In the end, I was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, and I died a slow, agonizing death in my cold bed, reborn into this life. My dad was frowning and sighing as usual. Hazel, your mother married a wealthy businessman. If you go with her, you'll live like a princess. My house is already too crowded. There's just no room for you here. My mother, Eleanor, was casually looking at her freshly manicured nails. Her voice was icy. Richard, that's not fair. Kids make a house lively. Besides, the rules in my new home are strict. My husband's ex-wife left behind twins, and they're not easy to get along with. If Hazel comes with me, she'll be eaten alive. Hearing them push me back and forth like unwanted trash, I felt absolutely nothing. When they finally turned to me, annoyed, and demanded to know who I wanted to live with, I silently picked up my battered duffel bag and walked over to my mother. Eleanor's face fell instantly. My dad let out a massive sigh of relief, a smug grin creeping up his face. But he had no idea without me there to stop it. In this life, that multi-million-dollar lottery ticket would be left in his jeans pocket, thrown into the washing machine by his new wife, and shredded into useless mush. Having a second chance at life. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to be comfortable before my time ran out. My dad shoved the rest of my things into my arms, kept staring at his phone, checking the lottery drawing date, and waved me off dismissively. Don't call me unless it's an emergency. I've got a busy household to run. His mind was completely consumed by that lottery ticket. He couldn't wait to throw his useless daughter away. I didn't say a word. I just dragged my bag toward the Maybach parked at the curb. Eleanor looked at my pillowed, oversized sweater, her brow furrowing with disgust. The back window rolled down, and Arthur's daughter, Chloe, pinched her nose and exaggerated disgust. Eleanor, is this the charity case daughter you brought from the countryside? Why does she smell like sour trash? From the passenger seat, her brother, Ethan, turned his head and gave me a cold and different look. Didn't say anything, but the disdain in his eyes was loud and clear. My mother looked embarrassed, standing awkwardly outside the car door. She wanted to suggest buying me some new clothes, but she was too terrified of upsetting her new family. Arthur Sterling, my stepfather, saw her embarrassment. He closed the business document in his hands. Let's stop by the mall first. Get the girls some decent clothes. I lowered my eyes and nodded quietly, following them into the high-end department store. The bright sparkling lights hurt my eyes. Asked the personal shopper to bring out several pieces from the new seasonal collection. My mother pulled me behind a clothing rack, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. Pick the cheapest ones. Don't look like a greedy beggar. Arthur is rich, but that money has nothing to do with you. Learn your place. Don't make things difficult for me. I watched her perfectly painted lips move, feeling completely detached. It had been a very long time since she had shown this much concern for me. Too bad this concern had nothing to do with love. I turned around and randomly pointed at a rack of clothes. Chloe strutted over, seeing me look at a simple white dress. She immediately snatched it away, giving me a smug glare. I want this one. You don't deserve to wear something this nice. Eleanor immediately put on a fake flattering smile. Of course, Chloe. It looks much better on you anyway. Hazel can pick something else. Looking at my mother's eager-to-please face, I silently stepped back. I just pointed at a basic t-shirt on the clearance rack. Arthur walked over and looked at the cheap t-shirt. He frowned slightly, then turned to the sales associate. Take that white dress, along with the other new arrivals, and pack them in her size. Chloe stomped her foot in anger. Dad, why are you buying her such expensive clothes? Arthur gave her a stern look. Our family isn't so poor that we can't afford a few dresses. Don't make us look cheap. My mother quickly chimed in. Yes, yes. Arthur is always so thoughtful. She then turned and glared at me. Well, thank your stepfather, Arthur. I took the shopping bags. Thank you, Arthur. Half an hour later, we entered the Sterling family estate. The grand, winding staircase and massive crystal chandeliers were breathtaking. The luxury penthouse my dad had bought in my previous life seemed like a tiny shack compared to this palace. But none of this mattered to me. I carried my bags and quietly retreated to the bedroom. My mother pointed out the room was huge. The bed was incredibly soft. I lay down and closed my eyes. A dull, throbbing pain was already starting to echo in my head. At dinner, my mother was desperately trying to teach me table manners. Hold your fork and knife like this. And don't make disgusting noises when you eat your soup. She was terrified I would embarrass her and ruin her status in this house. Chloe sat across from me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. She picked up a bowl of steaming hot soup and handed it to me. Here, have some soup. Just as I reached out to take it, she intentionally let go too early. The scalding hot soup spilled directly over the back of my hand. Before I could even gasp, my mother was already shaking. How could you be so careless? Do you know how expensive that rug is? Go to the bathroom and clean yourself up. Now. She cared about the rug. She cared about her reputation. He didn't care at all about my red, blistering skin. I wiped my hand with a napkin, stood up and bowed slightly. I'm sorry. Arthur set down his utensils, his expression darkening. Chloe, apologize. Chloe rolled her eyes. It was an accident. She just didn't catch it. Arthur's voice went cold. I won't say it again. Apologize. Chloe muttered a half-hearted sorry. My mother quickly tried to play mediator. Oh, they're just kids playing around. Hazel has tough skin. She's fine. Arthur, please don't be mad at Chloe. Arthur ignored my mother entirely, slid a tube of burn ointment across the table to me. Go put this on. I took the medicine. Thank you. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed gently applying the cream. My phone rang. It was my dad. The background was loud with the sounds of a rowdy bar and glasses clinking. He took a drag of his cigarette, his voice dripping with arrogance. Hazel, your old man is about to be filthy rich. My lottery numbers are a guaranteed win. But since you chose to go with your mother, don't think you can come back to beg for a single dime of my money. I have big plans for this cash. Just stay out of my way over there. I rubbed the ointment over the blisters on my hand, my voice completely flat. Okay, hope you get rich. I hung up. Suddenly, I heard soft footsteps outside. My mother was standing at the door. She pushed it open, looking at me with pure suspicion. Don't go calling your trashy father. Don't bring his peasant energy into this house. It took me years to secure my place here. Behave yourself, and don't drag me down with you. I stared at her perfectly preserved face. Okay, I will. She seemed satisfied with my submissive attitude and shut the door. In the middle of the night, a migraine hit me like a sledgehammer. It felt like my skull was being split open. A cold sweat broke out all over my body. I pulled open my nightstand drawer. My bottle of painkillers was empty, clutching the wall. I slowly made my way downstairs to find some medicine. The living room was pitch black. I walked toward the patio, only to find Arthur standing there, apparently suffering from insomnia. 2. He held a glass of red wine, staring out into the dark night. Hearing me, he turned around under the moonlight. He looked at my pale, lifeless eyes and spoke softly. Chloe's mother passed away when she was very young. That's why she acts like a porcupine. Don't take it to heart. He poured a glass of warm water, found a box of extra-strength painkillers from the first aid kit, and handed them to me. I took them and swallowed 2 pills. Thank you. He studied my ghostly pale face. For the first time since my rebirth, I felt a flicker of genuine human warmth. I gripped the warm glass of water. I understand. Over the next few days, life was relatively quiet. Under Arthur's warnings, Chloe stopped causing trouble for me openly, but she still hated my guts. Every time we passed each other in the hallway, she would deliberately bump my shoulder. Or at dinner, she would push the dishes she knew I disliked right in front of me. Ethan always watched from the sidelines, never participating but never stopping her either. I didn't care. One afternoon I came back from a hospital checkup. The oncologist told me that the tumor was spreading much faster than expected. I had 2 months left most. I pushed open my bedroom door, only to find Chloe rifling through my duffel bag. Ethan was leaning against the door frame, frowning as he watched her. What are you looking for? Get out of there. Before Dad catches you. Chloe was stubborn. Mind your business. I just want to see what kind of trash she's hiding in here. She dumped the bag upside down. Several empty prescription pill bottles tumbled out. Along with them was a worn, faded photograph of my Grandma Maeve. Seeing me walk in, Chloe froze, clutching one of the empty pill bottles. The mocking words she was about to say died in her throat. Why? Why do you have so many of these heavy painkillers? She stammered. He walked over quietly, took the photo of my grandmother from her hands. I carefully wiped her fingerprints off the photo with my sleeve. Then I swept the empty pill bottles back into my drawer. Are you done? My voice was as faint as a whisper. If you're done, Please zip my bag back up. Ethan stared at the pill bottles, then at the photo of my grandmother. His eyes grew complicated. He stood up straight, grabbed Chloe's arm, and pulled her back. In a stiff but sincere voice, he said, "I'm sorry. She shouldn't have touched your things." I stared at Grandma Maeve's smiling face in the photo. No need to apologize. Nothing last. Anyway, those words seemed to strike a chord in Ethan. He looked at my dead, hollow eyes, expression shifting into something unreadable. As he dragged Chloe out of the room fell silent again. A moment later, my phone vibrated frantically. My dad had sent over a dozen texts on Snapchat. "That stupid bitch put my jeans in the washing machine. The lottery ticket is ruined. It's all gone, shredded into paper pulp. Did you know this would happen? Why didn't you warn me before you left? We're getting a divorce now. Pick up your phone. Get over here." Looking at the angry texts, I could perfectly picture his veins popping on his forehead. In my past life, I had practically burned my hands, trying to fish that ticket out of the washing machine to save him. And what did I get? He abandoned me the moment he got the cash. I coldly typed back a few words I didn't know. Then I blocked him, silenced my phone, and threw it onto the bed. My head throbbed violently again. I popped 2 of my new painkillers and swallowed them dry. That evening, I went for a walk along the tree-lined path outside the estate. The fresh air helped ease my headaches a bit. Just as I turned a corner, a shadow blocked my path. It was my dad. The stench of cheap gin and stale tobacco hit me before his hand grabbed my arm. Richard's grip was brutal, the calloused fingers digging into the flesh of my forearm through the thin fabric of my sweater. His face was flushed crimson, the veins along his neck bulging like writhing worms. "You," he spat, his breath hot and sour against my cheek. "You knew, didn't you? You knew that crazy bitch was going to put my clothes in the wash. You did this. On purpose, you little brat." I didn't flinch. I didn't try to pull away. The dull, persistent throbbing behind my left eye made his shouting sound muffled, as if he were yelling at me from underwater. "I didn't put your jeans in the wash, Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Your wife did. Don't give me that smart-ass mouth." Richard shook me violently. My head snapped back, a sharp spike of white-hot agony shooting down my spine. $10 million. 10 million. It was shredded into wet paper. I went to the gas station. I checked the numbers on the screen. They matched. Every single one. "And you just walked away. You left me with that brainless gold digger." He raised his hand, his heavy palms swinging backward to strike me. I closed my eyes, waiting for the impact. In my previous life, he had hit me. When he was drunk, when he was angry, when the tea was too cold, when his back hurt. Pain was an old acquaintance. The blow never landed. "Let go of her." The voice was low, sharp, and cut through the evening chill like a honed blade. I opened my eyes to see Ethan standing beside us. He hadn't just spoken. His hand was locked around Richard's wrist, squeezing hard enough that Richard's fingers twitched and involuntarily loosened their grip on my sweater. Richard glared at the taller, better-dressed teenage boy, his posture instinctively defensive. "Who the hell are you? This is between me and my daughter. Mind your own damn business." "You're standing on private property," Ethan said coldly, his tone chillingly similar to Arthur's. He didn't look at Richard's angry face. He looked down at the bright red marks Richard's fingers had left on my arm. "And you're assaulting a minor. Security has already called the police. If you aren't past those gates in 10 seconds, you'll be spending the night in a cell." Richard looked past Ethan toward the iron gates of the estate, where 2 large men in dark suits were already marching down the driveway. Panic flickered in his bloodshot eyes. He shoved Ethan away, though Ethan barely swayed, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "You think you're safe here?" Richard sneered, backing away toward the street. "You think these rich snobs care about you? You're nothing to them. Just a pity project. When they throw you out on the street, don't come crawling back to me." He turned and practically stumbled over his own feet as he fled down the paved road, disappearing into the shadows of a tree-lined avenue. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching the road until Richard was entirely out of sight. Then he turned to me. The harsh moonlight caught the sharp angles of his jaw. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a clean silk handkerchief, and handed it to me. "You're bleeding," he said simply. I reached up and touched my lip. I hadn't even realized Richard's ring had grazed me when he grabbed me. I took the handkerchief, pressing it against the small cut. "Thank you," I murmured. Ethan stared at me, his dark eyes searching my face for panic, tears, anger, anything.
but he found nothing.
I was as calm as stagnant water. He's your father? Ethan asked, his voice dropping slightly. Biological, I replied, stuffing my hands into my oversized sweater pockets. Though biologically, tumors belong to us too, and we don't usually call them family. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly at the strange analogy, but he didn't ask further. Let's go inside. Dad is home. Inside the main house, Eleanor was sitting on the leather sofa, her face pale as she sipped a glass of white wine. When she saw me walk in behind Ethan, she immediately stood up, her high heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Hazel, she snapped, her voice hushed but venomous. What was that scene? Outside? The security team said some filthy vagrant was screaming at the gate. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? If the neighbors saw. It was her father, Eleanor. Ethan interrupted smoothly, walking past her, toward the grand staircase without pausing. And he wasn't just screaming. He attacked her. Eleanor froze. Her eyes shifted from Ethan's back to me, looking for marks. When she saw the small smear of dried blood on my lip and the dark bruises forming on my arm, her expression didn't soften into motherly concern. Instead, her eyes narrowed with intense annoyance. Richard, she muttered under her breath, clutching her wine glass so tightly. Her knuckles turned white. That useless, pathetic leech. I knew he'd cause trouble. I told you not to contact him, Hazel. Why are you bringing his drama into this house? I didn't contact him, I said softly. He followed me from the hospital. The hospital? Eleanor sneered, catching the word. What were you doing at the hospital? Looking for attention? Don't tell me you're trying to play the sickly, tragic girl to get Arthur's sympathy. I'm warning you, Hazel. Arthur hates weak, high-maintenance people. If you start making scene after scene, he will toss us both out. She went to the hospital because she needed her medicine. Arthur's voice echoed from the second-floor balcony. He descended the stairs slowly, dressed in a simple charcoal gray housecoat. His presence immediately smothered the tension in the room. Eleanor stiffened, a instant, practiced smile plastering itself over her features. Arthur, darling, Eleanor purred, stepping forward to smooth his lapel. It's nothing really, just a misunderstanding. Hazel's father is a bit unstable. I'll make sure he doesn't come near the house again. Arthur didn't look at Eleanor. His eyes were fixed on me, specifically on the way I was leaning slightly against the wall to keep my balance. The headache was blooming now, a dull, crushing pressure behind my forehead that made the chandelier lights blur into streaks of yellow fire. Did you take your medicine? Arthur asked me directly. Yes, I lied quietly. The pills were empty. I had thrown the empty bottles into the trash that morning. I'm just tired. Arthur looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Eleanor. Make sure the kitchen prepares something light for her. And call our family doctor tomorrow morning. I want her to have a full physical examination. Eleanor's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A full physical? Arthur, that's really not necessary. She just has a cold or some minor country ailment. Do it, Arthur said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He turned back toward his study, pausing at the threshold. Hazel, if that man comes back, tell the guards immediately. You don't have to talk to him. Okay, I whispered. As soon as Arthur's study door clicked shut, Eleanor dropped her smile. She glared at me, her eyes burning with resentment. A physical examination? Do you know how much a private house call from Dr. Harrison costs? You're playing a dangerous game, Hazel. Don't think Arthur doing this means he cares about you. He's just obsessed with maintaining order in his house. You're a liability. I know, I said. I'll go to my room now. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her standing alone in the grand hall with her wine. 2 weeks passed in a blur of escalating pain. In my previous life, the tumor had taken its time, slowly robbing me of my vision, then my movement, before finally stopping my heart in that freezing, dark bedroom while Richard counted his money in the living room. But in this life, without the illusion of hope, my body seemed to be giving up much faster. The doctor Arthur had ordered, Dr. Harrison, had come to the estate under the guise of a routine checkup. I had managed to hide my symptoms during his visit. I bit the inside of my cheek until the pain kept me sharp, lied about my energy levels, and hid the blood-stained tissues in my pocket. Dr. Harrison had noted that I was severely malnourished and anemic, prescribing vitamins and iron supplements, which Eleanor sneeringly handed to me with a lecture about how I was wasting money. She didn't know that every night, While the rest of the house slept, I lay on my soft, luxurious bed, clutching my head as convulsions ripped through my skull. One afternoon, the pain woke me from a feverish nap. My vision was double. There were 2 ceiling fans spinning above me, 2 balcony doors, 2 desks. I sat up slowly, feeling a warm, metallic liquid trickle down my upper lip. I wiped it with the back of my hand. Bright, dark red blood. I reached for the tissues on my nightstand, but my trembling fingers knocked the box to the floor. As I leaned over to pick it up, my knees buckled, and I tumbled off the bed, crashing heavily onto the rug. The door opened almost instantly. What was that noise? Chloe's voice snapped from the doorway. She had been walking down the hall, likely on her way to her own room. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me crumpled on the floor, holding a tissue stained with crimson against my face, my eyes unfocused. Hazel. Chloe's tone dropped its usual bratty edge, suddenly sounding very young, very frightened. What's wrong with you? I tried to sit up, but my hands lacked the strength to push my body off the ground. Nothing. I rasped, my throat raw. Just dizzy.
Can you hand me
the tissues? Chloe stood frozen for a few seconds, staring at the blood dripping onto the cream-colored carpet, the very rug Eleanor had fretted over weeks ago. But Chloe didn't yell about the rug. She slowly walked over, picked up the box, and handed it to me with trembling fingers. As I pressed a wad of paper against my nose, Chloe's eyes fell upon the open bottom drawer of my desk, which had bounced open when I fell. Inside were no clothes, no trinkets, no jewelry. There were dozens of empty prescription bottles, all with high dosage neurological painkillers printed on the labels, bare-stamped with the logo of the city's specialized oncology center. Beside them sat a series of folded white papers, my formal diagnosis forms, dated 6 months ago. Chloe dropped to her knees. Without asking, her small hands reached into the drawer and pulled out the top paper. Inoperable glioblastoma, she read aloud, her voice trembling terribly. Expected survival timeline, 2 to 3 months. She looked up at me, her face ghostly white, her eyes wide with horror. This is from before you came here, before you moved in with Eleanor. I squeezed my eyes shut, letting out a soft sigh. The secret was out, but surprisingly, I felt no panic, just an overwhelming, bone-deep exhaustion. Don't tell your father, I whispered, opening my eyes to look at her.
He has
enough to deal with. And don't tell my mother. She'll just think I did it too. Ruin her marriage. Are you insane? Chloe suddenly screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. Tears sprang up in her eyes, spilling over her cheeks. You're dying.
You're
literally dying in this room, and you're telling me not to say anything? The door slammed open completely. Ethan stood in the doorway, breathless, having run down the hall when he heard Chloe's scream. What happened? Ethan demanded, his eyes scanning the room. The blood on the floor, Chloe on her knees crying, and me, sitting against the side of the bed, like a broken doll. Ethan, Chloe sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at the papers in her lap. She's sick. She's really sick. She has a tumor in her head. Ethan's face went entirely rigid. He walked into the room with long, fast strides, snatched the papers from Chloe's hand and read them. His eyes scanned the medical jargon, the stage 4 designation, the signature of the chief oncologist at the university hospital. His breathing turned heavy. He looked down at me, the icy, indifferent boy who had glared at me from the passenger seat of the Maybach weeks ago was gone. In his place was someone staring at an unimaginable tragedy. Why? Ethan's voice was barely audible, thick with suppressed shock.
Why?
Didn't you say anything? When Dad brought Dr. Harrison, why didn't you show him this? Because there's nothing to do, I said quietly, leaning my head back against the mattress. It's too late. It was too late before I even packed my bags. Does Eleanor know? Ethan asked, his jaw tightening so hard I could hear his teeth grinding. No, I said. And she shouldn't. She wanted a quiet, obedient daughter to bolster her status as the perfect stepmother. A dying daughter is an inconvenience, a tragedy she'd have to perform for. I just wanted a quiet place to sleep. Chloe buried her face in her hands, letting out a stifled sob. I was so
mean to you.
I spilled hot soup on you. I threw your stuff. It doesn't matter, Chloe, I murmured, feeling my consciousness begin to fray around the edges as another spike of pressure tore through my skull. You were just being a child. I don't mind. Ethan grabbed the medical papers and turned on his heel. Where are you going? Chloe sobbed, looking up. To tell Dad, Ethan said, his voice flat, absolute, and furious. Right now. 10 minutes later, the house was thrown into total chaos. I was lying back on my bed, too weak to sit up, when the door burst open once.
More.
Arthur rushed into the room, abandoning all his usual stoic composure.
His
Tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes wild with a mixture of disbelief and profound sorrow. Behind him came Eleanor, looking bewildered and annoyed, trailing in her silk
house gown.
Arthur, what is the meaning of this? Eleanor was saying, her voice high and shrill. Ethan came barging into your office, throwing papers around. What lies has Hazel been telling? Shut up, Eleanor. Arthur roared. It was the first time I had ever heard Arthur raise his voice. The sheer power of his shout echoed down the hallway, making Eleanor freeze, her mouth hanging open in complete shock. Arthur dropped to his knees right beside my bed. He didn't care about the blood on the floor or the mess. He took my cold, clammy hand in his warm, large palms. Hazel, Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes searching mine.
Is
this true? Dr. Miller at the university hospital is here, doctor? I looked at Arthur. In my past life, I had never had a father who looked at me with this kind of raw, desperate care. Richard had only ever looked at me to see if I was useful, if I had money, if I was in his way. Yes, Arthur, I whispered. It's true. Arthur squeezed my hand, his knuckles white. He turned his head slowly toward Eleanor, who was standing frozen by the door, her face draining of all color as she finally read the room. You. Arthur's voice was dangerously quiet, vibrating with absolute disgust. You brought your daughter here, knowing she was living in poverty, and you
didn't even notice she was dying?
I didn't know. Eleanor stammered, stepping back, her hands waving frantically in front of her. She never said anything. She was acting fine. Arthur, you have to believe me. I had no idea. Because you didn't care to look. Chloe shrieked from the corner of the room, her eyes red and swollen. All you cared about was whether she ruined your stupid rugs or made you look bad in front of your high society friends.
You
screamed at her when I spilled soup on her. You told her to pick the cheapest clothes so she wouldn't look like a beggar. You're a horrible mother. Chloe, how dare you speak to me like that? Eleanor screeched, but her authority was entirely gone. Get out, Arthur said softly. Eleanor stopped. What? Arthur stood up, turning to face her. Standing at his full height, he looked
terrifying.
Pack your things and get out of my house, Eleanor. We are done. Arthur.
No.
You can't do this. Eleanor panicked, rushing forward to grab his arm, but he brushed her off as if she were a nuisance. We're married. I love
you.
I love this family. You can't throw me out over a mistake. A mistake? Arthur looked down at her with pure disdain. Your child is terminally ill, and you treated her like an unwanted houseguest because you were afraid she'd ruin your comfortable lifestyle. I married a woman I thought was refined and caring. Instead, I brought a parasite into my home. Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. If you are still here in 31, I will have my legal team destroy every asset you have ever touched. Eleanor stared at him, realizing with sickening clarity that he was completely serious. She looked at Ethan, who turned his back on her. She looked at Chloe, who glared at her with pure hatred. Finally, she looked at me. For a second, I thought I might see a glint of maternal remorse in her eyes. A crack in the porcelain doll. Instead, her face twisted into ugly, concentrated rage. You did this. Eleanor spat at me, her voice dripping with poison. You ruined everything. You were always a curse, Hazel. From the day you were born, you ruined my life, and now you ruined my marriage. She turned and slammed the door behind her as she fled down the hall to pack her belongings. The room fell into a heavy, quiet stillness. Arthur turned back to me, his posture softening instantly. He sat on the edge of the bed and gently brushed a strand of hair away from my forehead. I'm calling the best specialists in the country, Arthur said, his voice resolute. We'll get you into the private wing at St. Jude's tonight. Whatever treatment, whatever pain management, whatever surgery. Arthur, I interrupted gently, reaching up to lay my hand over his. It's okay. The doctor's already checked. Surgery will kill me on the table. Radiation won't work anymore. I don't care, Arthur insisted, a tear finally escaping his eye and tracing down his stern face. I have the resources, Hazel. I can make you comfortable.
I
Won't let you suffer. I looked at him, then at Ethan, who was standing by the foot of the bed with his head bowed, wiping his own eyes, and at Chloe, who was silently weeping. In my past life, I died in a dark, freezing room, listening to my father scream into a phone about money, entirely alone, unloved and forgotten. In this life, I had no money. I had no grand victory, but sitting in this sunlit room, surrounded by people who were fighting to give me comfort, I felt a strange, profound warmth blossoming in my chest. Thank you, Arthur, I whispered, my voice breaking slightly.
I
I would like to be comfortable. The next month was the quietest, softest time of my entire existence. Arthur didn't send me to a cold, sterile hospital. Instead, he brought the hospital to the estate. A team of private palliative care nurses and top-tier oncologists were stationed in the East Wing. They managed my pain with precision, ensuring that the blinding migraines were kept at bay with advanced intravenous medications. For the first time in 2 lives, I was never in pain. Eleanor was gone. Arthur's lawyers handled the divorce with brutal efficiency. She was cast out with nothing more than the clothes she had brought into the marriage, blacklisted from every high society circle in the city. I heard through the nurses that she had tried to move back into a small, cramped apartment, abandoned by her wealthy friends, screaming at the walls. Richard's fate was even worse. Without the lottery winnings he was supposed to get, his new wife had left him, taking what little savings he had left. Desperate and broke, he had tried to sue Arthur for holding his daughter hostage, hoping to extort a settlement.
but
Arthur had unleashed his legal team upon him. Richard was charged with extortion, domestic assault, and harassment. Unable to pay bail, he was sent to jail, left to rot in a cold cell, cursing the memory of a washed lottery ticket he would never understand. Meanwhile, inside the Sterling estate, time moved slowly and gently. Chloe didn't go to school much during those weeks. She spent her afternoons in my room, sitting on the armchair beside my bed. She read books aloud to me, her voice soft and careful. She brought me fresh flowers from the garden every morning, placing them on my nightstand, right beside the photograph of Grandma
Maeve.
Look, Hazel, Chloe said one afternoon, holding up a bouquet of yellow roses. I picked these myself. Grandma Maeve would like them, right? I smiled weak, looking at the vibrant yellow petals. She would love them.
Chloe.
Yellow was her favorite color. Ethan, too, changed completely. The cold, aloof boy was gone.
He sat quietly at
My desk every evening, studying his university application materials, just keeping me company so I wouldn't wake up alone in the dark. Whenever I needed water or whenever the blanket slipped, he was there before I even had to ask. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun poured through the massive windows, casting warm amber light across the room, Arthur came in. He sat down beside my bed, holding a warm cup of tea. How are you feeling today, Hazel? He asked softly. I feel peaceful, I said truthfully. My body was extremely weak now. I couldn't walk anymore, and my sight was fading into a permanent soft blur. But my head was clear. There was no pain.
just a
Light, weightless feeling like floating on water. Arthur looked at the photo of Grandma Maeve on the nightstand. Your grandmother raised a wonderful girl, he said gently. I wish I could have been your father sooner. I wish I could have given you a full life. I looked at Arthur, seeing the genuine grief and tenderness in the eyes of a man who didn't owe me anything, who had taken me in as a stranger and fought to give me dignity in my final days. You gave me enough, Arthur, I whispered, reaching out to touch his hand.
in
My past life, I died cold and alone. I thought the world was a cruel place, where love had to be bought with $10 million. Arthur frowned slightly, confused by my words, but he squeezed my hand tightly. In this life, I continued, my voice growing softer, lighter, I learned that love isn't something you win in a lottery. It's just someone holding your hand when it gets dark. Arthur's eyes welled with tears. He bowed his head, resting his forehead against our joined hands. You are my daughter, Hazel. Always. Ethan and Chloe walked into the room moments later, sensing the quiet stillness hanging in the air. Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my other hand, while Ethan stood beside Arthur, his hand resting on his father's shoulder. The room was bathed in the brilliant, warm rays of the twilight sun. Outside, the leaves on the trees rustled softly in the autumn breeze. My eyes grew heavy. The dull blur of the world around me began to dissolve into a warm, gentle brightness. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel angry at Richard, or at Eleanor, or at the unfairness of my shortened life. I looked at Grandma Maeve's smiling face in the fading light, and for the first time across 2 lifetimes, I felt completely, utterly safe. I let my eyelids close. I squeezed Arthur's hand one last time, heard Chloe's quiet, tender whisper, "Goodbye," and drifted into a long, painless sleep.